and one of their main clients is the Times, and they were looking for a women's football reporter, basically to do a little column on a Sunday, like a roundup of the Super League games.
Yeah.
And they wanted somebody, they didn't just want to have it as like an office person that didn't really know what they were talking about. So Ian asked my course leader if anybody would be interested in doing it, and I got it basically.
And was women's football something that you was hoping to get into as a journalist?
It wasn't something that I'd really considered. Obviously, I'd always watched it, and particularly the 2015 World Cup. I always watched and obviously was a fan, really. But then, because there's very little coverage of it in the media, I never really saw it as a career opportunity until obviously this was said. And then, you know how it is as a student yourself, you hear the word "The Times," and I was like, well, I'll do whatever I need to do to kind of get my name in print in the Times.
So was this opportunity, was it temporary to begin with, or how did that work?
To begin with, well, all the contracts are done season by season, but it was something that they started in that season, so like September 2017, and it was literally just for a 250-word column on a Sunday. So it wasn't really a reporter; it was just for that one Sunday each week. I did a roundup, so like performance of the week, a rising star, like a villain, that kind of thing. Just a little roundup, really.
And was that for their website or their newspaper as well?
For both, yeah.
For
website,
both.
Online and in the paper.
So once you started doing this, was you submitting it over the internet or like via email, or was you going into their offices and meeting with them and stuff?
So initially what I did was, obviously, because it's quite a small piece, there was the option to go to a game or to do it from home.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to a game because I thought I might as well get the best out of the opportunity. And then for like the first week, Ian came with me. We went to Man City because their academy stadium is right next to the Etihad.
Yeah.
And went there, and I used to file the copy to Ian, and then he would edit it or basically give me the feedback rather than me sending it straight to the office, who would change it, but they wouldn't tell me why they'd changed it, sort of thing. So I did that for the first probably 3 months or so, and then Ian said my copy was good enough just to go straight to the office, so it's emailed to the sports desk, and then obviously their team of sub-editors will change it or not change it, in fact, because some of the things we've found as it's women's football, they've changed it, and they've changed it wrong because they don't have the knowledge of the game. So that's one of the reasons why the Times didn't just want to give it to like a bloke that didn't really follow the game, because unless you know the game, there's not that much information out there on the internet.
And this was like less than before you'd finished your second year at uni, right?
Yeah, it would have been like the start of my second year, really.
So how did you find that? Because I imagine, like, obviously the Times, like you say, is like a national newspaper, so it was a really great opportunity. How did you find you adapted? Because I imagine you hadn't done anything quite on this pedestal before, so was it nerve-wracking? How did you sort of deal with it? Was you confident that you could do well and pull it off?
I was pretty confident because obviously the fact that they believed in me to do it to start with, the fact that my lecturer had put me forward to do it, but also I think it was the fact that this was my dream career. Like, yes, I'm doing a sports journalism degree, but what I always wanted to do was work in newspapers, so I knew that I needed to take this opportunity kind of like with both hands. So I think the one thing I would say is without Ian, I think I would have really struggled, because the things you learn at uni, yeah, like we do a professional sports writing module, but like it's so different. Like obviously each paper has its own style, has ways of writing things, and like without that sort of guidance from Ian, I think it would have been a really big step. Whereas he was like the middleman between me and the paper for those first couple of months. But I kind of learnt that basis of knowledge without kind of just seeing my work that was different in the paper.
Do you feel like, well, it probably did, but do you feel like it sort of accelerated your ability as a journalist, compared to if you hadn't have done it and you'd have just been on the degree? How much has it helped you improve? I imagine some of your classmates that perhaps haven't had these kind of opportunities, do you feel like you've maybe not you're not better than them or got ahead of them, but how much has it accelerated your sort of skills?
I think what it is that old journalism cliche of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And from
Mm,
doing this, it's completely like from that 200 word thing, I'm now the women's football reporter. Like I'm earning like 500, £600 a month just from the Times. Like I'm getting other, like all the other opportunities that I've had, like the Independent and the BBC, all came from that one opportunity. So I think that's the biggest advantage that I have compared to other people on the course. Like you can be crazy talented, and I know there's so many people that are as talented or more talented than I am, that just haven't had their big break, and that goes for like people in the industry generally. I think the biggest thing is getting your big break, and if you don't get your big break, then sometimes you can be like volunteering or whatever until you kind of get that moment. And I'm just lucky that my moment kind of came at a time where I was able to take advantage of it, and I had the right people around me to help me do that.
So after 3 months of writing these columns, what did they then offer you? How long was it when they offered you the position of being their sort of women's football reporter?
Well, essentially, after those like 2 or 3 months or whatever, when I was filing straight to the desk, obviously I spoke to the editors a little bit more, whereas before it was me speaking to Ian and Ian spoke to the editors.
Okay.
So then one of the editors asked me, there was like a women's friendly coming up, well, it wasn't a friendly, it was the World Cup qualifier. And they asked if I'd go to that. And I said, they wasn't expecting me to say yes, but they offered me it based on the work that I'd done in the column. And I said, yeah, of course. So I went to do that, and then I did a match report for that. I think that went well. Again, that first match report went through Ian, but again, he was happy with it, and it went in the paper more or less the way I'd written it, which I think definitely gives you confidence when you see that you can do that. You can then build on that. So I think I did that, and then obviously that was the England games, and then Phil Neville was appointed. So all of that kind of, as I was growing, women's football was growing as well. So now we kind of do a piece in the paper that I've just finished, actually, my one for this week, a Saturday piece. It's normally between 400 and 800 words, and it's about whether it's an interview or particularly now. When I first started, it was a lot of interviews, but they're really keen on me in terms of growing and hopefully getting a permanent job at the end of my degree. They're keen on me trying to find stories and find news and things that you don't know about the game. So one of the stories I did that I got nominated for that award was something on women's ACL injuries.
Okay.
So it's more like a feature or something that people don't know, not just an interview which anyone could do, kind of thing.
And that was your original idea, was it, on the ACL injuries?
Yeah. So what I'd noticed that because my football coach has done our ACL 3 times, and it's something that seems to be more prominent in the women's game, or it seemed to be as a pattern. So what I did was I did a little bit of research online, looked at some studies that had been done, and then I got in contact with a surgeon that had operated on professional women's players, and he basically said to me that, yes, there is a direct link between women and ACL injuries, and the makeup of their knee makes them more likely to have them.
And that was obviously something that hadn't been covered before. So what award did you get nominated for? Was it for that specific story?
It was the Sports Journalism Awards, and I was nominated for Football Journalist of the Year.
Yeah.
As part of that, you have to, I'm not sure exactly how many articles, I think it's like 3 or 4, that you have to, well, the Times submit them for me, so they paid to enter me in the competition. Obviously, me being me, I expected nothing to come of it, because I was up against like Henry Winter and Johnathan Liew and like crazy talented people that have been in the industry for years and years. And then obviously I made the shortlist, which is amazing.
And
but yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
so when, just remind me, when was it that you first got the opportunity with the Times? I know you've told me, but I forgot.
I think I was just looking for a uni project that I'm doing at the moment. I think it was October 2017.
Yeah.
That's when I first started contacting the clubs and letting them know what I was doing. So I reckon that's when I would have started.
And I think I saw maybe March 2018 when I did a bit of research. That's when they'd started asking you to cover the Women's Super League full time. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was more like.
Were there any moments while you're writing for the Times, and you're going around doing these interviews with? Well, I've seen you've interviewed Phil Neville as well. Tell me a bit about that. How did that come about? Was that something that Times set up for you?
It's crazy. It's actually surreal because you go to these press conferences and there's Phil Neville like sat across the desk and he's asking you how you are, and you're like, this is crazy. That's Phil Neville, like a Man United legend.
Yeah.
And Phil Neville is actually class. Like, he's a really nice guy, and obviously he often watches the Super League matches to see how his players are getting along.
Yeah.
And like he's often at Man City, and if I'm there for a game, he'll come over and say hello and ask how I am and stuff. So like that's insane in itself because like I interviewed Nikita Paris the other week, and like she's one of the best women's players in the country, or one of the best in the world this season. And like I definitely don't take that for granted. Like each time I do it, I'm like, wow, this is like amazing.
Does it feel surreal? It must do.
Yeah, definitely, because like the one thing I would say, like compared to when I've worked in men's football, women's players are so open and like they're just really nice people. I haven't had a single like bad interview kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it so much easier as a journalist when people are actually open to the media instead of in men's football where they're kind of naturally against the media, I think.
And obviously you took these opportunities with both hands, like you said, and you've picked it up and run with it. Have you always been a confident person when it comes to sort of putting yourself out your comfort zone a little bit and sort of going for it? Is that something that you'd say that you probably always had in you, or do you think this time you just jumped into it because you couldn't resist?
I think a big part of it is that this was my dream career and that I knew that this was such a big opportunity for me. I think there is certain things that have definitely put me out of my comfort zone, like when you go to your first like England press conference and there's loads of journalists asking questions, and obviously you sit there initially and you're just one of the ones that sits there instead of asking a question. And then like later in the season you'll like pluck up the courage to be one of the people that actually ask a question in a press conference. And I think that's definitely something that you develop as you get more used to it and you get to know the other journalists, and it's a lot less daunting. I think it's very hard when I first walked into that first press conference room and like you don't know anyone. You're just, for a start, I was a woman in a male-dominated sport, and I was young as well. It's like, who's this kid that's working for the Times? So yeah, I think it's over a matter of time. Your confidence definitely grows, but I think for that first one, you just have to jump into it because it's such a big opportunity.
So when did the BBC and the Independent contact you? Did they get hold of you directly? Had they like seen your work for the Times and asked you to do some pieces for them, or was that before the Times? I don't know.
So the Independent is quite a good story actually. I went to the Football Writers Award. I can't think when that was, but I think it was like late 2018. You could probably Google it. It was the one where Mo Salah won Footballer of the Year.
Okay.
So basically, each of the newspapers have a table, sort of like, I don't know, 10 journalists that they bring. Yeah. And the Times invited me on the table, which I thought was amazing to start with, because obviously there's like hundreds of journalists that work for the Times.
Yeah.
So I went to this awards evening, and somebody from the Independent came over to the table at the end and asked like who I was, because obviously I was like a young girl in a room with a lot of white men, essentially.
Yeah.
And he came over and asked me what I was doing, and I said, obviously, I mainly cover women's football, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, we're looking for somebody to do some live blogging of the World Cup, and I was like, great. He asked my number, took my number, and then he messaged me later on and asked me to kind of help out with it. Well, then I know a couple of other journalists dropped out, and I basically ended up covering the entire World Cup through the live blogs that the Independent did, and that included all of the England games, the World Cup final. I did player ratings for each game, so it turned into like a massive big project that obviously I earned quite a bit of money from.
Yeah.
Just from meeting that one guy at that awards evening. So I think that's one thing I would say. Like, I know lecturers and stuff bang on and on and on and on about contacts, but actually it's crazy. Like, all of the things I've got, I've been from contacts. Like, that's absolutely crazy.
And I imagine, like, this isn't about money for you at this stage. I imagine you'd be doing all this for free if you had to because you're passionate about it. But when you do receive sort of money for your writing, after obviously we went to college together and studied journalism, now we're at uni doing it, was that a moment where it sort of feels like it's all paying off, forgive the pun, paying off, but it must, for me, obviously, I've never been paid for anything I've done. I haven't got that far yet, but I imagine, obviously, I will do. But is that a big thing for you? Did that feel sort of surreal as well? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but for me, I would say, particularly at the start, for me, there's no payment that compares to seeing a byline in a national newspaper.
I was going to ask about bylines after, to be fair. Carry on.
Yeah. Seeing your name there, I don't think anything can compare to that. Like, for me, the money wasn't a big thing, but now that obviously I'm getting to the end of my degree and like I need to find a job, I think it has become more of an important thing, and I'm trying to work out whether to go down the freelance route or whether to kind of try and get a more full-time permanent role somewhere, but then that involves giving up your freelance stuff. So I think that's where I'm at the moment. But then, of course, the money definitely plays a bigger part. But initially, I would say, it was great. It covered my costs. But for me, it was more about the byline.
Are you freelance for the Times at the minute then? Are you not actually officially employed by them, or how does that work?
I'm officially employed by Wardle's agency, who are run by Ian.
An agency?
Wardle's agency.
Okay.
So the money that I'm paid, Ian kind of gets from the Times, if that makes sense, and then he pays me.
Yeah.
So I think he takes like 10% or whatever.
Yeah.
Where say an article I do is like worth £100, he gives me like £80 or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's something that will change once I finish my degree. If I do choose to be a freelancer, I'll just go straight through the Times.
Mm.
The actual chance of getting a staff job at the Times is basically never going to happen because they're not taking anyone on, and they're actually getting rid of people because that's just the way the newspaper industry is at the moment, sadly.
So, can you explain to me a little bit about how this agency sort of setup works? Because obviously I'm not familiar with that. Is that something that you had help with, or did you have to figure that out for yourself? Going through an agency. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that works?
So Ian, who got me the job, is a partner. It's Ian Whittle and John Wardle, and they run the Wardle's agency.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that are supplied by the Times to fill however many. So like they do all the press conferences for the Premier League teams. They do like a roundup, like this women's roundup that I do. They also do a roundup of like Championship, League One, League Two, and then obviously also the work I do now, extra on top of that, any of the women's stuff. That's their contract sort of thing.
Okay.
And they have contracts with all of the newspapers to do similar kind of stuff.
Mm. What do you think it was about you that these people sort of see in you? I know you've obviously the eagerness to take the opportunity. But because I'm sort of a believer in everything you get, you've sort of attracted in one way or another. You know what I mean? You've deserved it. What do you think, without asking you to sort of stroke your ego, what do you think it is about you that has sort of opened all these doors?
I think that basically I wouldn't have got this job unless my head lecturer had recommended me for it.
I know.
So I think.
But then after that, it obviously comes a point where they've offered you more opportunities based on your own precedent. So it must. I know you're being modest by saying it was your lecturer that had done it for you. He initially got you in the door, but obviously since then, would you not say that you've sort of done it for yourself since then?
Yeah, I think what is important is what made me stand out to my lecturer was me. It was stuff that I'd done. I'd gone out of my way to volunteer. I spent a year volunteering at Macclesfield Town. I had done lots of work for blogs and various things. I'd always stood out on my lecturers. I'd got first in my assignments. So just from an academic point of view, that had obviously made a big difference. And that's what pointed me out to him to start with. So of course, just the fact that he thought of me was on the back of my own work. But then, obviously, there was a girl who I wouldn't like to kind of name because I want to bring her into it. But she was also offered the opportunity, and we went to a first game together, and we got to go in round to speak to the manager, and she didn't want to ask him any questions.
Okay.
And whether that was anxiety or whether that was, she didn't feel like confident enough to do that. But like, I took that chance, and obviously then she ended up not. She was offered the same opportunity that I was.
Yeah.
But I took it. She didn't. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Do you ever get nervous in interviews, Molly, or leading up to one?
I think it's always hard when you speak to somebody that you have never spoken to. Like, obviously you take Phil Neville as an example.
Yeah, let's talk about Phil.
I feel a lot more comfortable talking to Phil than I would have done when I first met him, because, obviously, as well as I do, there's certain interviewees that treat journalists as, as people that are kind of there to do their job, and then there's others that treat them like something they have to deal with when they don't really want to deal with.
Yeah.
And obviously, you don't know what you're going to get when you speak to somebody. But I think, obviously, with Phil being the footballer that he was on such a big scale, and the media attention that came with that, I think, he kind of gave us all a fair chance, because obviously he got quite a bad rep when he started, because he came from the men's game and kind of maybe didn't have much knowledge of the women's game. So I think some people kind of went in on him, particularly the women's journalists that have been covering the game for a long time. Whereas I just he was England manager, and I asked him questions on that, because it's, he didn't make the decision to be appointed.
When did you interview Phil?
Pardon?
When was it that you interviewed him?
Well, obviously I've been to a lot of his press conferences now, but there was one that particularly sticks in my mind. I think it was in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And it was a press conference before England played. I think it was England played Brazil in a friendly or something, and we got there, and it was just me and one of the journalists.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, there was this whole room of seats spread out, ready for all these media, and it was just me and this other journalist that turned up.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that is quite daunting when, like, he's looking at you about 5 inches from your face, and it's just you there. And so I think it's important to prepare. Like, preparation is key, because if I hadn't have prepared in that situation, I would have just been stood there like a right idiot. Like, there's no question.
How do you prepare? What does that involve for people that aren't journalists that will listen to this? What sort of things do you have to do before an interview? Because obviously audiences only read the final piece, but there's obviously a long process before that. So what do you have to do? How do you prepare your questions? To what extent do you have to research the person?
I think it's important to do research, but I think one of the main things that I've particularly learnt from the desk is to think about what you want the piece to be at the end of it, or you kind of just go around asking a bunch of generic questions.
Yeah.
I think it's important for an interview with 10 questions that you're going to ask. Try and go into an interview with topics that you want to discuss and that you want to, think about. Don't be stuck to your questions and not listen to the answers, because often somebody's answer is the lead on to your next question.
Yeah.
And that can be a big thing that maybe, you could say something really outrageous and you could just miss it because you're too focused on your next question, kind of thing. So I think it's important to research, make sure that you're confident in what you're saying, and then I think that comes across in your question.
Apart from Phil Neville, what other things stick out for you in terms of who you've spoken to and the pieces you've written? What are some of the most memorable pieces you've done?
I think purely the Women's World Cup, Women's FA Cup final at Wembley, like that's surreal as a journalist to be born at Wembley. I think that's the pinnacle of anyone's football journalism.
Hello? Oh no. I'm going to call you back. As soon as I asked the question, it cut out. About the most memorable pieces.
The most memorable thing that I've done purely as a journalist is the Women's FA Cup final last season. Okay. Because it's at Wembley, that's such a big moment for any journalist's career. Yeah. Regardless of what you're there to report on. The atmosphere was amazing, and that was a great thing. But also looking ahead, probably the fact that I'm sat here booking flights, booking hotels to go and report on the Women's World Cup, like that's an incredible thing for somebody of my age to be able to do.
Is that for the Times?
Yeah.
When did they reveal to you? Are you going with any other journalists from the Times, or are you the sort of chief reporter for the World Cup for them?
I'll be the chief reporter, and then when it gets to the sort of semi-final stage, if England get that far, they'll also send out like a Henry Winter kind of thing to do some pieces, and then I'll do some more background pieces kind of thing.
So when did you find out that they were sending you there?
It's something that's been ongoing for a couple of months now, just trying to sort out the details, because obviously you think of reporting on the World Cup, which is great, but then you've got to think of like how you're going to fund that, how are they going to fund that, whether you go in and out of games, whether you're there for the whole tournament. So ironing that out has been really stressful, but we've eventually got there. Yeah. And talk about money actually that you mentioned earlier. I won't be getting the same wages as say a Henry Winter would do. What we're doing is basing it on they're covering all of my flights, all of my hotels, all of my travel and my food and taxis, etc. For a month. But that's it. I won't be paid for any copy.
And I imagine you don't even mind, do you? Because that opportunity is such a big one that, like I say, this is your passion, this is what you want to do. So I've been speaking to other people throughout this project, and they say at this stage, they're still so young that money isn't that bigger thing at the minute. It's just the fact that, you're doing what you love. So I imagine going to the World Cup, you don't care, do you, that you're not getting paid? Obviously, they're covering everything.
Not. As long as my costs are covered, I wasn't bothered at all, because you think of the people you're going to interview. Just as a fan, to be insane. Like what England going World Cup, and I'm reporting on that. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. What is it like sitting in a press box of a match? Is it hectic? Is there lots of people there, or how does it work?
I think a women's football press box is obviously, I'd say it's maybe 50-50 in men and women. and I think it's probably a lot more of a welcoming place than maybe a men's press box is. So, like, obviously I work for the Times, but the Guardian women's football reporter is one of my best friends, and, you know, you're always there to kind of help each other out and stuff like that. Obviously it's quite stressful, particularly with, like, last-minute goals and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like,
rewrite your whole copy up.
Yeah. But I think, it's definitely, it's a good environment, and it's definitely an environment where you meet new people and you learn a lot of things, and, you know, these people have been doing this a lot longer than I have, so it's great to kind of be in that circle now.
In terms of women's football in general, obviously in recent years it's been growing a lot and getting more and more media attention. How big a role do you think journalists like yourself have to sort of play in spreading the awareness of the game and getting more people interested? Because I imagine for a lot of people still, women's football is sort of, I don't want to say they don't care about it, but they probably do not pay much attention to it, especially like men's football fans. How important for you as a journalist is it? Are you conscious of the fact that you're writing about it and you're spreading awareness? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Do you think journalists like yourselves play a big role in sort of bringing more people into the women's game in terms of their attention?
It's definitely something we're aware of. I think what I always say to fans that may be critical of what I do or what other people do is that at the end of the day, my bosses tell me what to write and how many words I have to write it. And I think, obviously, women's football is competing with the massive juggernaut that is the Premier League, you know, all the other sports in the world. So I think, obviously, we can only do so much. But I think we're definitely aware of the role we play. And in fact, I think at times we're almost scared to be critical of it and critical of the FA, which is obviously part of our job as journalists. But it can be quite scary to do that because you're kind of highlighting the areas of the game that need improvement. I mean, one of the biggest things at the minute is, you know, we've got a professional league and we've got top-class players, but the attendances aren't there to back that up. I mean, if you look at Barcelona v Atletico Madrid women, they've sold like 40,000 odd tickets for one of their league games, whereas for us, that's only what we get when we hold a game at Wembley for the FA Cup final. So I think we're very aware that we need to try and do as much as we can to keep finding these stories and keep meeting people and spreading the word. But at the same time, maybe clubs in this country also need to do a little bit more to market the game and tap into that men's football demographic, which gets those however many thousand people go to Old Trafford, go to Man United women's games.
What do you think some of the things that do need to be done in terms of that then, in terms of marketing the game more? The FA, you said it can sometimes be a bit scary, you don't want to criticise the FA, but what is missing in terms of on people like the FA's behalf? What can they do more?
I think you've got to remember that the FA banned women's football for 50 years from, I think it's 1921 to 1971.
I didn't know that.
If you look at it that way, you imagine both men's football and women's football from nothing. The men have taken all the best stadiums, they've taken all the grassroots facilities, they've taken the best coaches, and we're definitely paying catch up to that. So I think obviously the two sports are never going to be equal, and that's something that we can't change. But I think one of the biggest problems is actually stadiums. It's where do you play these games? Because if you take Everton, for example, if you look at where Goodison Park is and where that main fan base of Everton supporters are, Everton women play in Southport, which is like an hour's drive from there.
Wow.
So you're never going to kind of tap into that market. And obviously the answer isn't to play women's games at Goodison Park every week, because for a start you'd have a load of empty seats, and secondly you'd be damaging the pitch.
Yeah.
But there has to be some kind of compromise. I mean, I know Man City are probably leading the way with that because they're the women's games play at their academy, which is literally a stone's throw from the Etihad, and I know they're quite good on getting like double headers, so the women will play an hour or two before the men's game kicks off, and people can go to both for like £1 a ticket or something. And I think that is something that is working, but yeah, definitely more of that needs to be done to help clubs all over the country, not just at clubs like Man City where they have a lot of money and can actually provide the infrastructure for that.
You mentioned earlier that before, sorry to keep dotting around, Molly, you mentioned about planning your questions out and having specific areas. I'm still getting used to that. I write all my questions down and then it just all jumbles up and I'm just hopping from topic to topic and it can be a bit hectic, so I do apologise. But you mentioned earlier that before you got this opportunity for the Times, you wasn't necessarily planning to cover women's football. I mean, you said you enjoyed the game, but it wasn't something that you was thinking about writing about. What was your aims before you got into women's football? Was it men's football or sport in general or news?
I think it was something that obviously I'd done a sports journalism degree, and I always knew I wanted to work in sport. And I remember sat in college with you writing my application to uni and talking about Drogba when he scored that penalty in the 2012 Champions League final. Being the journalist to write about moments of history in sport that fans would look back on for years to come, and that's definitely something that I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily have a route as to how I was going to do that. Obviously, I was also interested in your athletics and things like that, and I always knew that what I wanted to do was print really rather than broadcast.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's the thing. Until you get your break, until you get that job that you think, yes, I want to do that, I think it's quite hard to be specific in what you want to do.
So for the foreseeable future, do you just see yourself strictly covering women's football from now on, or will you delve into other things as well?
Obviously, because of the work I did in men's football for the Independent for the World Cup, and the fact that for the BBC I've recently started, obviously you have to start at the bottom of the BBC and do all the worst jobs possible.
Yeah.
But I've started...
Which are what jobs?
Basically, you start doing media monitoring. So instead of writing match reports and doing the live blogs, if you've ever seen a BBC live blog for like a match, they have social media posts that go into them.
Yeah.
And they have... comments from the Radio 5 Live commentators.
Yeah.
So your job as a media monitor is literally to media monitor. So you scroll through Twitter, you find out what people are talking about. I don't know, if Gary Lineker starts slating Leicester, you put that in.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You get comments from the Radio 5 Live commentator. Obviously, because of how big the Premier League is, that's what you cover.
Yeah.
So that's what you start. And then you get a little bit more freedom. Obviously, I did a couple of FA Cup previews the other week, and I did a women's match report during the Jubilees Cup. So obviously, I think what I want to try and do is be a football journalist that have women's football as my specialism, rather than pigeonholing myself into just doing women's football, because bloody FA could go ban it for another 50 years and then I wouldn't have a job.
Oh God, yeah, no, I don't think that will happen. But do you think you've would you say women's football is still quite a niche thing and almost a gap in the market for a journalist at the minute? Because I don't think all papers cover it, do they, regularly?
No, I think it is definitely a growing thing. Obviously, the Telegraph has just employed a staff writer in women's football, and that's the first one that has ever been in newspapers. So they're kind of leading the way on that front. I think the Guardian are about to do something similar. So I think if I'd have gone into this for men's football and I'd been doing E2 roundup, for example, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you about interviewing Phil Neville.
Yeah.
So I think the climbing through the ranks is a lot easier in women's football because the interest level from a lot of journalists is lower, so that if you're interested in it, you're suddenly asked if you want to go and cover an England game.
Yeah.
So I think in that way it's definitely niche. It's becoming, I think people are now aware of it, and a lot of young journalists are told to kind of go down that route and volunteer at women's clubs, etc., because there are those opportunities there. So I think eventually it'll probably go the other way, where there's too many media, quickly the game is growing. But at the moment it is still a bit of niche, I think.
Another question I wanted to ask is, you're doing all these match reports, you do the Times, you do the Independent, the BBC. I've looked through your Twitter and your Instagram occasionally, and I see that you're constantly getting on trains at like stupid o'clock in the morning to get to places and getting about really late. And it all seems a bit non-stop and full on. How do you deal with that? Is it stressful? And how do you deal with it? Does it ever get too much? Are you ever like, oh God, I need a break? Or are you thriving from it all and you just love it?
I honestly, I haven't had a day off I can't even remember how long. I'm sat here now, this is meant to be a day off. Obviously, I'm speaking to you, I've done 500 words for Times. I've got more stuff to research and obviously get done. But I think what you have to remember is, you have to continually remind yourself that this is your dream career and this is what you want to do. We had a guest lecture from Matt Lawson, who's like the head sports writer of the Daily Mail, come in. And I asked him, I said, do you have any advice on your work-life balance? And he said, I've never had a holiday in my life where I haven't had to interrupted because something has happened. Like, we're in an industry where news is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's constant. I can't tell you when Phil Neville's going to be sacked. He could be sacked while I'm on holiday, or he could be sacked while I'm sat at my desk. There's no time scale on it. And he was saying that, like, his wife was giving birth and he had to go and file a story. Like,
fucking hell.
You're just sacking off your life. But that's okay, because...
Are you prepared for that, though? Is that... I suppose, do you want this to be your life? Obviously you do.
I think you have to love it, because for me personally, I know it's different for other people, but I could not imagine anything worse than getting up on a Monday morning, arriving at your office at 9 o'clock, finishing at 5 o'clock, arriving home, eating your food and going to bed, and repeating that 5 days a week, and then living for the 2 days of weekends.
Yeah.
I want to have a job where that job is my life. That's something that I enjoy. I don't count the hours until I'm finished, kind of thing.
Yeah. What? I hope you're not. Are you in a rush, Molly? Because I'm aware that it's 45 minutes, but I've still got quite a few questions to ask. Is that all right?
No, it's all right.
Yeah, good. What sort of challenges have you faced, in general, since throwing yourself into all of this? Is there any moments that you've really had to dig deep to overcome, or any struggles that you can think of that have really like questioned your character and your... Do you know what I'm trying to say? Is there any like obstacles that you've had to overcome?
I think I've been very lucky in the way that one thing I've done has led on to another, and obviously I've been very, very lucky in terms of the opportunities that I've got. But I also think there have been times where I felt out of my depth. Obviously, for example, I was at a Manchester City game versus Chelsea, and obviously it was just after the Eni Aluko scandal where we argued that she was not being picked for the England team because she was black.
Yeah.
And it was still going on. It had been resolved. They'd been found guilty, blah, blah, blah. Well, then she came on for Chelsea against Man City, and a section of the Man City fans booed her. Now, I tweeted it out because, as you do, it's something... But I didn't make enough of it. I remember the desk ringing me up and saying, "What's this about Eni Aluko getting booed?" And I was like, "Well, she just got booed."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Why didn't you ask somebody at the end of the game about that? What did the players think of that?" And me being naive at the time, I was thinking about the game and the result rather than the fact that that's maybe a bigger issue. And I think that's something that you definitely learn. I mean, there was an occasion, I'm saying this off the record, by the way, where Phil Neville had a press conference and he said, and I quote, "The players are all looking really good. They've got a tan. They're all looking really nice."
Yeah.
And obviously the press officer said, "Don't repeat that."
Yeah.
Now, all of the women's journalists agreed in the room. I came back and told Ian, and he was like, "That's a front page story." And I said, "Yeah, but do I want to burn my bridges with the FA and print that story when they're specifically told us not to?" And he said, "Somebody that I understand why somebody in your position wouldn't want to, but somebody that had been in the industry for 20 years would have just gone, fuck it, I'll print it."
Yeah.
So I think it's, you know, for any journalist, you have to learn what your moral compass is and what you are willing and not willing to do.
It's interesting that you bring this up because some things that other people, the audience might not, who are listening to this, might not sort of know is how ruthless the journalism industry can be. And like you say with the Eni Aluko thing, you were thinking, I need to report on the match, but the reality is news is driven by sort of audience reaction and sort of almost pandemonium. The more sort of, sometimes the more furore the better, do you know what I mean? Is that something you've come across a lot in terms of your editors or people asking you to write? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm sorry, I don't word my questions very well, but how much...
No, I know what you mean. I think the desk, when I say the desk, I mean like my sub-editors who I ring into, they're always looking for the scandal.
Yeah.
Know, and that is just the way it is because that's what sells the papers. But I think something that I have drawn a line on and said that I won't do, which I know some journalists do, but some of us also frown upon,
Yeah.
is when I'm speaking to someone like Phil Neville and Man United have won the night before, I refuse to ask him about Man United because I'm not there as a Man United journalist. I'm there as a women's football journalist and I'm interviewing him as England women's manager. I'm not interviewing him as former Manchester United player Phil Neville.
Yeah.
And I think the desk will always be looking at the men's football line because the men's football line is probably there for a bigger audience.
But you're not doing that. You're strictly women's. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like I say, I jump about a lot. I'm just gonna ask another random question. Apart from Phil Neville, who are some other really big names that you interviewed?
I think big names in the women's game. You've got to look at England captain Steph Houghton.
You interviewed her?
Yeah, I've interviewed her several times.
What, sat down face to face sort of thing?
Yeah, one-on-one, over the phone, after games. It's quite odd actually that kind of thing is just normal, and that's insane. I mean, someone I really look forward to interviewing after a game, which was one-on-one, was Hope Powell, who was the England manager back when I was a fan. When I sat and watched women's football growing up, and she's now Brighton's manager. And I think that was a kind of surreal moment that somebody that I'd look up to when I was a kid, I was now interviewing. So I think that was really cool.
Yeah. And like you say, you get... Sorry, I'm getting thrown off here. I'm just looking at my sheet of questions where you say, I try and listen to what you say. But Macclesfield Town, see, I'm jumping back again. Sorry, Molly, I hope you don't mind. Another 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'll be done. I hope you don't mind.
Right.
But Macclesfield Town, was that something that you'd arranged off your own back?
It was something that basically the press officer that used to work at Macclesfield Town is somebody that was a graduate of my degree, and obviously probably because you're not that into football journalism as such, you might not be aware, but pretty much every football league team has an army of volunteers that do a lot of the press stuff. There'll be the press officer that gets salaried, and then he'll essentially employ loads of bloody students to do all his work for free.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good thing because, and I know a lot of people benefit from it, but personally it wasn't my cup of tea. What you do is you go through the interview process and you show them a match report that you've done, and you have to prove that you can put a spin on, the team losing or whatever. You turn up on a match day, you either do the social media or you do the match report for the website, and then through the week you do program interviews. Now, it wasn't my cup of tea, as I say. I don't want to go into PR. I know a lot of people that do, and a lot of people on my course that have done really well from that. But I think it's one of those where it's definitely beneficial because you almost learn what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
It did help me in terms of interviewing, because you have to go and interview a player after the game, whether they've lost 5-0 or they've won 5-0. You have to interview them because you need to get something for the website. And particularly at that stage, they were a non-league club. Obviously, this was the year they were promoted. But there were times when they didn't want to speak. There were times when they weren't very good at speaking, and they certainly wasn't media trained. So I think that's something that you develop your interview skills a lot. But it was also something that I was quite glad to finish when I come to the end of that season.
Yeah.
And that it was over because, I know people that work in league clubs. I won't mention names, but like you take Port Vale, for example, and there's people I know that are in my year that are very talented writers that go into like Yeovil away for no money. They're getting there themselves. They're paying petrol. They're doing like hundreds of articles a season, and they're getting nothing. And I think for me personally, once I'd had a taste of the Times and the payment for my articles and the fact that I was getting reward for that, I think it was just a no-brainer to kind of move away from PR, I guess.
Match reports and feature articles are obviously very different things. What do you prefer doing?
I think it's a strange one, actually, because when I first sat down with the editor of the Times, who I'm lucky enough to know quite well now, and is a lovely, lovely guy, he said to me, look, we're not an organisation that wants to just do match reports, because anybody, with respect, anybody can write a good match report, really, if you're a good journalist. It's about finding stories and finding the things that people don't already know. So I think I would say, based on that, I probably prefer writing features. I prefer learning things, getting to know people. I mean, one of the other features I did that got nominated for that award was a feature with 2 Crystal Palace ladies players that were going to be foster parents. And they'd just passed the test for that. And
I'd seen that, yeah.
Learning about their lives, learning about how they're balanced. Obviously, they're in a semi-professional league and they're playing against Man United, but they're not getting any money for that, and they've got a career and other things as well. So I think that's really interesting, getting to know the people behind the player.
It leaves more room for imagination and things, doesn't it? And sort of room to express. I love feature articles myself. Like, I can compare it to what I do at uni. News articles is very sort of rigid, strict, to the T, report the facts, bang, 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 done. Whereas feature articles, you've definitely got room to sort of for your own creative input, which is great. So that's definitely another thing. How was it at the awards evening?
It was amazing. I was lucky enough to be able to. I took my lecturer with me, the guy that first suggested that I would be the one to do this work for the Times, and I think he's like, I'm lucky. My course has got incredible contacts, and he has worked for the BBC, worked for ITV, covered countless World Cups. So he knew a lot of the people in the room anyway, so I think he was a great person to have there.
Yeah.
But also, like, it was great that I was able to take him and he could see kind of what I'd worked for. And it was amazing in terms of the people that obviously I was on the Times table, and I was sat next to Martin Ziegler, who's like the chief sports writer, and he was talking to me about what I do, and that was amazing. But at the same time, sitting at that table and watching all the awards, I think it also showed how far I have to go and how far women have to go in the industry, because there was probably a 50-50 split in terms of the presenters of the awards being male and female, but there was only one award out of 20 actually won by a female.
Yeah, shit,
and I think that shows how far the industry has to come in terms of making sure that it's more inviting to people of all kinds of backgrounds as well, not just women, not just people of colour, but also people that Oxbridge background. I think the industry has a lot to learn in that respect still.
And what motivates you to sort of go forward? What, in terms of what let's just say, what are your goals? Like, sorry, Molly, let me just get my head straight. Right, you're coming up, you're finishing uni in a couple of months, like I am. How much are you thinking about what's going to happen afterwards, and what are your goals? Do you know?
I'm thinking about it a lot, purely from a financial reason. Like, you know, as well as I do, I come from Peterborough, I come from a council estate. You know, I don't have things to fall back on like maybe a lot of other people in the industry do. But I'm very aware that I need to find a place to live. I need to find a career, and luckily enough, I'm in a position where now, if I look at the work I'm doing for the Times and the work I'm doing for the BBC, and if I also consider that I could take on a little bit more in terms of the fact that where I'm in uni, say on a news day from 9 to 5, I could be out doing more work.
Yeah.
I've probably got enough to sustain me as a freelancer. Now, of course, I'm looking for other jobs. I've actually got a job interview with ESPN on Tuesday in London.
Wow.
As a regular freelance reporter and writer for them. So obviously, if I can get, say, that on top of what I'm doing now, I'll be able to function as, you know, as a freelancer with my own journalism business.
Wow.
And that's great. But also, I'm in a position where I'm trying to, I actually had this conversation with Ian earlier this week. What do I do about a house? Because if I get a house in Stoke, which is logical because it's close to Manchester for the BBC, it's not a million miles from London. You know, I drive now, so I'm quite mobile in terms of that. I don't want to be committed to a year-long tenancy when next week I could be offered a full-time job in London.
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's something that I'm trying to balance at the moment, whether I can get a short-term lease somewhere just so that I have a house when the student tenancy runs out, but that I'm not kind of bogged down with it just in case.
Yeah. So you're not going to be moving back home to Peterborough then?
No.
No.
Because I haven't had the times yet as to what will happen. And
Yeah.
I won't be able to have that until after the World Cup.
Yeah.
So by that time, my tenancy will nearly have run out here.
Yeah.
So it's really important that I kind of plan for the future, definitely. And the fact that actually, as a freelancer, I'll probably earn more money when you consider that as a salaried writer, for my first salary job, I'd be taxed at source, all of that kind of thing. Whereas a freelancer, you know, you can get an accountant to help you claim back on your expenses and all of that kind of stuff that I'm having to do at the moment. It's actually probably more attractive to be a freelancer than it is to have a salary job in the industry at the moment.
So that's definitely what you're leaning towards, is being a freelancer?
Definitely. I think the only thing that would stop me from that is if the Times offered me a full-time job, because that is my dream. That's always what I've wanted to do. So if that happened, then of course it probably wouldn't be for as much money as I earn now at this stage, because you'll be living in London, and when you take all that into consideration, it eats out of your salary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it would be the dream, you know.
And if we look a little bit further than just after uni, let's say 5-10 years, what aspirations do you have? Have you set any specific goals, or do you have any idea roughly where you'd like to be in terms of your career?
When I sat at the SJAs, obviously it was a shock to be nominated for that award, but I wanted to make sure that, you know, now the year after and the year after that, I'm a feature on, and then it's not just
a one-off.
Yeah. And And I also think I'm personally hoping that England are going to go on and win this World Cup, and it's going to be a watershed moment for women's football,
Yeah.
and that there will be more opportunity for full-time coverage. And if there is one of those in 5 or 10 years, then 100% I'd love to do that, particularly for a newspaper. The argument's there whether newspapers will even exist in their same form in 5 or 10 years, but we don't know what's going to happen with that. But that's certainly something that I'd like to be involved in.
Can England win the World Cup?
Do you know what? I think they can. I think things have to go right for them. We have to hope that we don't get any more injuries. We have to hope that perhaps somebody like the US or Germany or the host France aren't in the best form. But as we saw in the Men's World Cup, not many people expected much from England. And in fact, England women will go into the tournament just significantly higher ranking than what the England men do. England women are ranked 4th in the world at the moment. So the expectation is there. It's just whether, obviously, it'll be Phil Neville's first major tournament and everything that goes with that. I think, to be honest, anything could happen. We could realistically go out at the group stages and we could realistically win the whole thing.
Yeah.
It should be a fun thing to report on, definitely.
Are you covering all the England games in the final then?
Yes.
No other games?
What I will try and do, obviously, I was just looking at this actually, because the desk suggested maybe trying to get to the opening game, which is the host France against South Korea, but obviously France is a vast country and the planning of it is a bit of a nightmare. I mean, for the first England group game, it's in Nice. The second England group game is in Le Havre, which is like 9 hours down the bloody road. And then we're back in Nice for the third group game.
So you're going to have to do all that travelling back and forth?
Yeah. So it's one of those where if there's a game, let's say the day after or the day before an England game in the same area, then I'll definitely go to it. I want to see as much as I can. But if not, I will kind of be limited to, I've got to cover the England games, therefore I've got to cover the press conference the day before.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff, when you add into travelling to all of that, I think it will soon eat up my time.
Do you get any time to yourself where you're not thinking about articles, press conference, transcription, who am I going to interview, shit, I need to prepare for that interview, I need to transcribe that one, I've got 500 words to do here, da-da-da-da-da. Do you ever get an hour to yourself?
At the moment, no, not really, because if anything, I've got the desk telling me you need to prepare more, you need to have stories in the bag.
Fucking hell.
That's so hard to do when 3 of my days are spent at uni.
Yeah.
And, I mean, last week I didn't even go to uni at all, and then I rocked up to an exam that I didn't even realise I had.
How hard has that been, juggling uni? Has it affected your uni work? Have your grades suffered, or have you managed to juggle it somehow?
I'm lucky enough to be academically quite strong, and that I probably don't have to work as hard as some other people to get first.
Yeah.
So like that exam that I rocked up to, I still probably got a first, despite the fact that I didn't really know what I was doing, or and that's something that I'm aware of, that I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. But at the same time, I'm working 10 times harder than anybody else on my degree because of all the other stuff I'm doing on top of uni.
Yeah.
To be honest, last year it wasn't as bad, and last year I was also working part-time in a coffee shop. I was working still for Macclesfield Town, whereas this year I've cut all that off. All I'm doing is paid work, and I'm still absolutely knackered. But obviously part of that is the fact that it's third year, but I shouldn't be this stressed because part of my degree is a portfolio of work placement. Obviously I've got that done. Part of my degree is career development and a CV. Well, obviously I've got all that done. But it's just literally the news days are a real pain because you're in 9 till 5 on a Wednesday and a Friday. And we do them a Friday there every 2 weeks. So luckily this week I'm not in. But it's very hard because on a Saturday my piece goes into the paper. So on a Friday I send it to the desk. Now if I'm in 9 till 5 and they try to ring me about a question about my article, I can't answer because I'm in uni. So I'm lucky enough to have actually worked with some great people that are aware of the struggle that I have. And I mean, I was speaking to the desk on Monday, and they were saying, "Don't speak to us. You've got an exam. Like, go and do that, and then come back to us." So I'm lucky that they are aware of that. But yeah, it certainly hasn't been easy just in managing my time, to be honest.
I'll start wrapping it up. I've just got 3 or 4 more questions, pretty simple ones. What is, if you could say one lesson, biggest lesson you've learned through this journey that sticks out the most, or some of the things you've learned, what would that be? About you, whether it's about yourself, about the industry, anything.
I think I've learned the importance of contracts, and that it really is not what you know, but who you know. And that is probably a fault of the industry that it is still like that, but luckily I've benefited from that. I've also learned that actually about myself, that I can do things and that I can jump in the deep end and I can swim, you know?
Yeah.
But you have to jump in, and you have to do things where you look around the room and you think, I don't deserve to be here. These people have worked for 30 years, but actually I do deserve to be there based on my talent and based on the things that I have done. And I think you have to have a certain amount of belief in yourself to kind of stand up in that room and be counted.
And when you compare yourself now to end of college, start of uni, how much in general as a person have you grown? How much confidence have you gained? What has it given you in terms of going forward in life?
I think it's an old cliche, but I have literally gone from being a student journalist to being a journalist. And obviously I am still a student, but the way I see the industry, the things I know about the industry now are completely different. And I think I'm now part of that, which is crazy. But I think I've learned that you have to back yourself, that all the work you do is worth it. Like, yes, I've been offered some amazing opportunities, but they've come off the back of the work I've done, and that every hour I spent doing rubbish blogs for free and all of this kind of WordPress websites and stuff.
Yeah.
They have paid off. They have paid off because that got me into uni, and that got me into this environment where I have got all of these contacts. So each thing you do, so
and one thing I will mention, every time you make a Facebook post, I think it's your mum, Starbird. You're great. Da 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 da. How supportive of your family been? How proud of you are there, and how much that helped you through it all?
Definitely, my mum is disabled, and I was a carer for her when I was at college. And coming to uni was a massive decision for me, because obviously, if you look at the sports journalism degrees that are around, there's none that are really near where we live, kind of thing. They're all like a long way away. And she always said to me that she would never let her circumstances kind of affect me, that she wanted me to go and be the best person that I could be, and she's always believed in me.
Yeah.
And I think, like, it's amazing that now she's able to see what I've been able to do, and she's always at the end of the phone, you know, if I need advice or if I need a hand, I know she's always there for me. So that's definitely played a big part in that, and her belief in me definitely, you know, that when I got that first byline in the Times, she was there buying it and seeing it and showing it to everyone, you know. That's a big.
And I suppose that's a massive part of what you do, isn't it? Making your mum proud.
Definitely, I think, you know, you realise that you can have as many people that you know or whatever, but the most important people are the ones you think to ring first when you're offered a job or when you've been nominated for an award or something. You know, you realise who the people who you really care about are, you know.
Yeah. Last question, Molly, that I ask to everyone that I interview. There's a lot of young people probably sitting in school right now, or college, or in a day job, and they might have a passion or a talent, some skills, but they're not necessarily indulging or using them very much, whether it's out of a lack of confidence or self-belief, or just because they think, oh, I've just got to get a job and earn money, and, you know, that's going to have to stay a hobby. What advice would you give to people in terms of how important it is to pursue your passion as a young person and make sure you're doing something you love?
I think you have to just keep trying, because, like I said earlier, I couldn't think of anything worse than 60 years of the same monotonous, working for somebody else, making somebody else rich. And yes, of course, people have to do that. But if like you can be better than that, and you've got something that you're passionate about that you want to do, you have to try, because if not, you'll sit back and you'll wonder where you miss those opportunities. I know people that are way more talented than me that haven't had their break yet, and I think I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing people, and my bosses haven't looked at me as a girl, or haven't looked at me as a student or as a 20-year-old. They've looked at me as a journalist, and I think there are people out there that will take a chance on young people, and you just have to find the right one, the right moment, the time that's right for you. And if you can do that, then you just have to take that opportunity with both hands and kind of do your best in terms of doing the best you can, and how important that opportunity is, because easily I could have just done those 200 words in that column and that was it. That could have just been like, 50 quid a week that I earned, and that was it, and then I went off and got a day job.
Yeah.
But I think you have to strive for more and be the best that you can, because nobody wants to aim to be mediocre. You want to be the best.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you talking to me, Molly, and I'd just like to say that you should be really, really proud of yourself. Keep it up, keep going, smash it, and I hope to see you in many, many a back page to come.
Yeah, hopefully. I hope all is going well with you as well, man. I'm glad you're stuck with uni.
I have, yeah. We've got a long way to go, but I'm definitely going to pursue journalism, no doubt about it. And also, in terms of the article, I aim to get because I've got my dissertation on at the minute and I have to transcribe all this, but 5 days to 7 days. So by this time next week at the latest, I'll have it up. Between now and then, I will probably message you about any images that you could send me that I could use of you interviewing or at a match. Just a few images to put in the article, if that's okay.
Sure.
And possibly might have a few little questions that might spring into mind, just in terms of when I transcribe back. Nothing like open questions, just a few little closed questions, touch up on the details that I might have to ask you as well.
Okay, cool, no problem.
I really really grateful for you speaking to me.
No worries, mate. Good
Cheers.
luck with it. I hope it goes
Yeah,
well.
you too. Keep it up. Like I say, be proud and just keep going.
Alright, see you in a bit, mate.
Cheers, Molly. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.